Have you ever been scared? And I mean, really scared. Maybe you're scared of the dark, or you're scared of being on your own. Or maybe you're actually just really scared because of all the stuff that's going on in the world right now. Sometimes it's really hard to understand why God allows scary things to happen. Things that are difficult to understand, we just can't work out why God allows it. In the Bible, in the book of John, Jesus has been telling his disciples some things that they find really hard to understand. In fact, they maybe even find them scary. He was telling them that someone was going to betray him, and it got worse. He then went on to tell them that that person was going to be one of his own disciples. Then Jesus went on to tell them that he was going away somewhere that they couldn't come. Of course, he was talking about how he was soon going to be put on a cross to die. Peter then said, "Lord, why can I not come with you now? I would give up my life for you." Then Jesus said something else that was really hard for Peter to hear. He said, "Peter, you're going to deny me. In fact, you're not going to deny me once. You're not going to deny me twice. You're going to deny me 3 times." Can you imagine how the disciples must have felt after hearing all this stuff? I'm sure that they were so scared. Then in John chapter 14, Jesus says this to them. You can read it in verse 1. He says, "Let not your hearts be troubled." Whoa, after all of this stuff that Jesus has told them, all of these really scary things that are going to happen, Jesus then says, but actually, don't let your hearts be afraid. How? How can we not let our hearts be afraid? And maybe some of these truths that Jesus told the disciples, you and I can take for today in these times when it's kind of scary to know what's going on. Here's the first thing that we need to learn from Jesus about how to not let our hearts be troubled. Number 1, trust Jesus. If you're a Christian, you'll know that Jesus has rescued you from sin and he's brought you into God's family. So if he's able to do that, you can be sure that he's able to help you and he's able to help me in the scary times in life. So trust him. Maybe you're thinking, well, actually, I'm not sure if I trust Jesus. Well, Jesus answers that worry too, because if you look at John chapter 14 and you go down to verse 6, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father but by me." Jesus is the way. God didn't just send us a set of instructions about how to come into God's family. He actually sent a person, and that person is Jesus. The Bible tells us that he is the only way that our sin can be forgiven. He's the only way that all of the wrong things that we've done against God can be forgiven. The Bible tells us that Jesus is the only person that you can believe in to be brought into God's family. So number 1, trust Jesus. Here's number 2, remember that Jesus is preparing a perfect place. Jesus knew that life wasn't easy for these disciples. In fact, Jesus knows that life for you isn't easy right now. And in fact, there's probably going to be lots of times in the future when we're not going to understand what it is that God's doing, when life seems complicated, when life seems confusing. But we know from the Bible that life doesn't really end whenever you die. In fact, Jesus said that he was going to leave earth to go and prepare a place for us, his children, to spend forever in. A place where everything is perfect. A place where there's no more sadness. A place where there's no more sickness or coronavirus. A place where no one ever dies. A place where people aren't nasty to each other. A world where everything is exactly the way God wanted it to be. Jesus was reminding his disciples here that this world that we live in isn't perfect, but someday we are going to live in a world that is. If you're a follower of Jesus, someday you'll live in that world too. That is definitely something to look forward to. So do you remember the 2 things? Number 1, trust Jesus. And number 2, remember that he's preparing a perfect place. That must have really helped the disciples that day as they tried to listen to all of the difficult things that were going to happen to them. But not only for the disciples, for you and me in these times that are really difficult to understand and maybe a bit scary, we should remember this week what Jesus says in John chapter 14. Let not your heart be troubled.